Yes, Spurs fans, welcome back to the Irish Hotspur here. This is going to be your weekly Tuesday panel evening show, and we're fresh into international break. I personally feel like this international break, the second one, is more annoying than the first one because it feels like just as we're getting going, all of a sudden it kind of stops again. But that being said, there won't be another one for quite a bit of time here. So we are about to get into the thick of the season where the games start coming thick and fast, and Thomas Frank is going to definitely have to deal with a whole lot that's coming his way. So this is our final break, an opportunity from or away from Tottenham Hotspur before we get definitely into the craziness, into the crazy parts of this roller coaster. We're joined by James from Spurs Related, who hasn't been on this channel in a while here, so it's good to have James with us, and of course Sam DaCosta, who's been a regular on these Tuesday panel shows, and then the lovely David Harris. If you are in here, everybody, smash the like button, please. Get into the comments. If you want to stop the show at any point, feel free to do so. We try to do our best to put your comments up here on screen, pinned at the top of the chat. If you do want to become a member as well, we do really appreciate it. Plenty of members content that does come your way and also just help support the channel a ton. But we want to make the best use of the people's time this evening, James and Sam, as well as Davos, of course. And Dave, I know, has probably a good FIFA session that he has to get back in with James over. And we'll get into this one. We're going to be talking plenty about Thomas Frank and about the bit of the Spurs attack at the minute. Just see if maybe Thomas Frank has found his winning formula in terms of an attack. But first, we're just going to kind of start off with whether, you think he's starting to build a new identity at Spurs, a bit of a Thomas Frank review sesh, if you will. James, as we head into the October international break, we sit third in the Premier League with 14 points from 7 games. We are through to the next round of the Carabao Cup and currently ninth in the Champions League standings with 4 points from those 2 matches in the Champions League. How would you assess Thomas Frank's start, to his life at Tottenham Hotspur?
Honestly, firstly, lads, pleasure to be back on here. It's been way too long. Absolutely buzzing, and I'm sure David will talk about our FIFA session in a minute. But
lucky.
but in terms of your question, Jack, I mean, what a fantastic start. I mean, of course it was disappointing against Wolves. Of course it was disappointing against Bournemouth. But if you told me at the start of the season or any other Spurs fan that we would be sitting 2 points behind 2 points behind Arsenal, 1 point behind Liverpool with 7 games played, I would have bitten your hand off for it. Of course, if you take 2 more of those points that we lost or 3 more of the points we lost against Bournemouth, then you're suddenly sitting top. It's a fantastic start. We got an unexpected win at City, although, of course, we like to beat them. But I think it was quite unexpected, really, in the grand scheme of things. And, to have a manager that can tactically change things up at halftime in games or during games when things aren't going right is just an absolute breath of fresh air. And I'm so happy so far.
Well, I mean, what do you make of the sort of play so far? Do you think it's sustainable, James? Do you think like what Thomas Frank is doing right now is he riding a bit of luck, or is he just getting started?
I think definitely we're screaming out for January as soon as possible. I think at times with the fullbacks, especially only having 3 quality fullbacks in a squad where they play once every 3 days for the next sort of 2 months is certainly something that needs to be addressed. I think the left winger position certainly needs to be addressed. But in terms of your question, in terms of the style of play, Jack, I'm very happy with it. It's much more solid. I think offensively we look more dangerous going forwards. I think at times you could understand that we definitely need a more out and out number 9, and maybe we'll get that in the blessing of Randall Kolo Muani when he comes back. But I certainly think that with a bit more quality in the left side of attack and maybe number 9 and our fullbacks, we have genuinely got something cooking here. And the fact that we've got such good midfielders in depth, the youth plus the experience in Palhinha and Bentancur is just so exciting for me.
And to you, Sam, how do you assess Thomas Frank's start to the season across all these competitions? And also a bit of the same question to you. Do you think his style of play, the way that he's gone about it so far, is that sustainable? Do you see it only getting better from here on out, or are you a bit worried?
I wouldn't say I'm worried. I think I'm tempering expectations. I think that a lot of people need to learn from Ange's first 10 games.
Yeah.
Also, quick side note: there is a November international break, so we've got another month to get into it, and then we'll stop again.
Okay.
It's for the World Cup qualifiers, so it's like, I don't know what they even needed this break for. But with Frank, I think that I'm overall pretty happy. I've been pretty bored watching the games. I'm not gonna lie, but we're grinding the results out, as James said. Sometimes you've got to win ugly, and a lot of games this season we've won ugly. That is a little bit of a concern, that we're not like outright dominating, because some of the teams that we've played, I think you have to kind of take into account the level of teams that we've played. In comparison to some of the other teams, we haven't played any real big teams other than Man City, and they're pretty much our sons. So that was kind of always a given. I think that I'm not concerned by it because I can see what Frank is trying to do in terms of building a defense, and not to upset or stir the pot, but the players basically have to unlearn the, in my opinion, diabolical defensive tactics that they've been drilled into for the last 2 years. Pause if I have to. And I think that it's going to take time for it to really gel. And I think that I've not been overly impressed with Van der Ven so far. I think that he's actually been quite rash. Not to draw out on certain players, but some players that I thought would be more comfortable in this system have been shown to make a few mistakes, maybe on the ball where they've got more time because teams aren't pressing us quite as hard. They're still pressing us, don't get me wrong, but I think that, when you're defending with 2 defenders, every team's tactic was basically press them and they'll lose it, trying to play out the back. I think that, yes, like all of us, I'm probably concerned that, we haven't really clicked into an attacking gear. But like James said, when you've basically only got Richarlison, Tell, Odegaard, and out of position Xavi Simons and Kudus to draw from, then you're going to struggle. We're still yet to see Kolo Muani, who by all accounts is basically indestructible, yet he's come to Spurs and he's missed a month. So that's another one that goes against the it seems to be the longest dead leg in history. So it's another one that goes against the medical department. I think it's that he's missed 2 games via injury in his whole career, and he's missed 4 now for us. One thing that's annoying me, and I know that a lot of managers will do this anyway, I just want to know what's going on with Solanke, man. It's taken so long. Every week it was like, I think Solanke will be back next week. And then now he's having surgery. What can you do about that? Fine, but it's just annoying that I was thinking, okay, Richarlison, he started well, he's kind of tailed off a little bit and kind of become the typical Richarlison that people complain about. And don't get me wrong, I actually don't necessarily dislike Richarlison, and he's staying fit. Touch wood. Everyone touched some sort of wood because I feel like I may have just jinxed that. But he's managing to do a lot of minutes. And he's gone on the international breaks. The traveling on the body can be tough, but thankfully he's managed to stay fit, because otherwise you're basically dealing with pretty much just Tell up front. And as much as I hope that he can come good, it's been a tough start for him. Obviously, great for him to grab the goal on the weekend. But for Frank, I don't think there's much really more that he can do with the attack at the moment, because he just doesn't have any options. Yet again, we came into the season with not enough. Obviously, they weren't expecting Muani to be out with a month-long dead leg. But I think that Frank is doing all he can. And, if you don't concede goals, you can't lose games. Maybe something that Ange might need to learn. But I can see the progress defensively, and I think that is giving me enough confidence, whilst also being cautious about giving him so much praise. So yeah, overall, I'm pretty happy. I'll give him a 7 if I had to rank it.
Solanke was also supposed to be indestructible, but I guess he wasn't either. When he came to Spurs, and the funny thing is, Thomas Frank is probably experiencing more injuries in the attack than Ange Postecoglou did. Ange Postecoglou, right, had all the injuries in the defense, but now it's just been flipped towards the attack here with all the injuries out, including James Maddison and Kulusevski, as we know. But Dave, is this early form under Thomas Frank sustainable up until the January window, especially because this next period is where Tottenham have had a history of tailing off after promising starts?
Well, look, that's the big question, isn't it? First of all, Sam, stop mentioning Muani. James will have nightmares of destroying him with calling Muani earlier on. And also, second of all, I really like the T-shirt. The old school crest is lovely there, by the way, as well.
Yeah,
but look,
go for it.
Yeah, it's lovely. I like it. I like that. Did you get that at the club shop?
It's 38 quid. I thought that was a bit of a steal,
It's
to
a
be honest.
bargain.
I had to buy
That's
two.
a bargain. Yeah. That's nice. Nice. I might have a look on the internet later on. But look, when it comes to is this sustainable, I think that's the big question, isn't it? I think it's hard to tell really because under Ange we got off to a promising start, and after the October international period is when all of our injuries came in, and he was blamed for a lot of them injuries. I think since then, we've realised that it wasn't all just down to him. There is a problem at Tottenham Hotspur, or maybe a problem with the amount of games these players are exposed to and stuff like that. That's bigger than just style of playing the way one guy plays. But look, when it comes to Thomas Frank, I think he's done everything I expected him to when he came in. I expected him to come in and make us defensively more solid. I expected him to, stop us conceding as many from set pieces, and I expected him to up our output from set pieces, which I naturally expected was going to put more points on the board. My big question was around the forward line when it came to Thomas Frank. What can he do there? Because he was never going to be able to copy and paste Brentford ball. He was always going to have to adapt his style of play. At Brentford, they had one of the lowest possessions of the league. It's not going to fly at Tottenham fans. Tottenham fans of every generation is so used to seeing Tottenham play a certain way of football. It's in our DNA, and we've shown that you can have this defensive stability with nice football. We've seen that under Pochettino, and ultimately any manager that's come in since, people almost want to try and get back to that style. Whatever manager we bring in, we bring in defensive managers. No, but we want to play more on the front foot and stuff like that. We're asking them to be what they've never really been anywhere else. And then when we brought in an attacking manager, we wanted to be more defensively solid. So the reality is we want someone that can bring a bit of both. To a degree, I think Frank has brought half of what Spurs fans want. And at the end of the day, once he made us more defensively solid, and I think he's done some clever management here. He realizes that forward line is going to take some work. It is going to take some time. He's got to blend in personnel. I'm pretty sure he's always also waiting for personnel to come back that he would like to get into that blend in the front line to make it a lot more, palatable for Spurs fans. So I think he's been sort of held back in that regard. Like, I don't want to get too carried away because I've been here before. Under Conte, we done well up until the October international period. Everything fell off after that. Nuno, we started off well, got sacked after the October international period. Jose Mourinho started well after the October international period. Results started tailoring off. Under Ange Postecoglou, we got off to a good first 10 games after the October international period. The wheels fell off at Tottenham Hotspur, and it's just the question is can Thomas Frank sort of survive that? It's going to be a tricky one because I think my problem is everyone painted Thomas Frank to be this magic man, that he's a tactician, he's got all the solutions to all the problems, etc., etc. Sometimes a manager is only as good as the players that he's got to work with, and I think we're finding that out right now, with Thomas Frank at Tottenham Hotspur, that he doesn't have the answers to make Johnson this all-encompassing David Ginola winger that everyone thinks he can be and stuff like that, he is limited by some of the players that he has to use here. But when I look at it, I think he's always going to be held back. You look at it, right? He's made the defense more solid. But the reason why we've dropped points recently is because we've stopped keeping clean sheets. Why have we stopped keeping clean sheets? Vicario has made a lot of mistakes in a lot of the games that we haven't kept clean sheets. That's always going to be in his game. It's been in his game since he's arrived at Tottenham. So there's always going to be moments like that that's going to let Thomas Frank down. That's going to let us fans down. And there's more than him in the team that are going to have off days like that. And that's where I struggle, to see, it really kicking on. You also look at the start of our season. The teams we've bet have all been relegation started teams. Burnley, Leeds, West Ham. We beat Man City, but we always beat them. But when we've come up against more difficult teams, the likes of Brighton, Bournemouth, we've dropped points. The clean sheets are tailing off now. We're not keeping as many. And going forward, we're not great to watch. My only hope is that he put out all of these technical players there at the weekend. You don't have players like a Johnson or like a Richarlison who are limited. They can all get control of the ball. They can all link up with each other. They're all quick. They can all do 1-2s and stuff. And it worked out in our favor. And I'd like to see him do more of that moving forward and persist with that front line until the likes of Moani is back fit and stuff like that, rather than keep chopping and changing, because I don't think he's helped himself in that regard. I think also some of the rotations have cost us points. And when you look at the fixtures we've got coming up, we're going into a tough month. You've got Everton. I think you've got Newcastle or Chelsea in there. You've also got Aston Villa. This is going to be the true litmus test of Thomas Frank between now and Christmas. Right now, I'd argue we're not good enough going forward to beat the better teams. which I can see trouble on the rising because you have to score goals to be able to beat them. And with the carry-on making mistakes, we're also liable to concede a goal. So I'm a bit worried heading into this fixture period, but seeing Kudus maybe spark into life a little bit, that goal off the back of Leeds, hopefully the confidence brewing in him. Hopefully there is the resemblance of something there that can maybe drag us through this difficult period. And even if you don't win, just don't lose. Put points on the board. And as long as you're putting points on the board, fans will be happy. But it's going to be a long, tough period. I think we'll pick up more points than maybe what we would have under previous managers like Andrew that. But how much more, I'm not quite so sure, Jack.
I'm most positive about the defense. Like, I think he already has more clean sheets than even Ange Postecoglou did in that amazing first 10-game run. So I know that the defense is definitely going to be the strong point, I think, and it's only going to probably get better under his period with us. And then I think he already is on track to have more clean sheets than Ange did in the total of last season. So I think that's where I'm pretty confident.
At 6 already across all comps.
Yeah, but I kind of I looked back, I think it was like a week or two ago, compared to how Ange, did so well in that first 10 or 11 games or whatever it was. Like, he didn't really have a ton of clean sheets even in that period. So we probably weren't asking these questions at the time, but with the benefit of ridiculous hindsight, maybe that's the same question would have been asked. Like, is that sustainable, right? The fact that we've gone on such a great run, but we're not keeping any clean sheets really at the same time compared to this under Frank. My biggest worry is probably where Dave is at. I'm worried about the attack, to be honest. I think we've only really scored bits and pieces here. We're not totally dominating teams going forward. We seem to be pretty reliant on set pieces. I think set pieces are a pretty sustainable way to score goals throughout the season, but we can't use that every single time because even against Leeds, we had like a total of like 2 corners or something like that, right? So you need to have, I think, a different way to score. And I'm just a little bit worried about at what point, when the games do start coming thick and fast against quality opponents, do we actually have a forward line that he can look towards, that he has confidence in, can deliver goals week in, week out? Because despite the performance against Leeds, it was only really one game for me, right? And it wasn't even that incredible, I think, of a performance going forward. I think it was pretty good, but I think it needs to be a lot better if we are going to beat the Chelseas and whatnot of the world that are going to be slightly higher of us. But Artist T, someone who's I'm normally a bit more positive than, but he's actually very positive about the Leeds performance, saying, I think we were on the up. Loved what I saw against Leeds. I'm actually quite surprised Artist just saying that.
Yeah, look, it was a good performance. We put 3 points on the board. We broke the curse. But let's not overdo it either. At the end of the day, I'm pretty sure, over the course of the season, Leeds will end up somewhere near the bottom, And like for instance, right, you look at Arsenal, who's top of the league right now. Look at the games they've played in the opening start of the Premier League. They've played Man United, they've played Liverpool, they've played Man City, they've played Newcastle. Look who we've played. And they're already top. We're already, I think, 1 or 2 points behind them in terms of the table, and we've got the tougher fixtures to come. So, are we going to keep pace up until January with the likes of Arsenal, who will probably have some of their easier fixtures coming up? It's going to be a tough ask, and that's why this forward line is so important, because the defense is doing their job, even with the carry-on making mistakes. They're doing a good enough job to be able to give this team the platform to go and win games. But a lot of the time when we go forward, we're lackluster. And I take your point, Jack. You can't survive off set pieces. But what I will say is the fact that we do have another avenue of scoring goals will help this be a little bit more sustainable than maybe under previous regimes, under like a Jose, a Conte, or a Postecoglou, because it's not an area you would argue we were prolific from, or we got a lot of joy from, or look dangerous from even, whereas now we do. So even if we're not playing well and we can't do anything going forward, we just get Danzo, Bergvall, or whoever else has the biggest biceps to launch the ball 60 yards straight into the box. You know what I mean? We can go along, hopefully pick up a corner, put the ball in, and we've got some animals in the air. Like, you look at the size of some of our players. You got Papa Massar already scored for one this year. Van de Ven's a beast in there. Bentancur gets on the end of quite a bit. Romero, even if he's not available, Danzo gets on the end of a lot. Paulini gets on the end of things in there. Richarlison is a big boy. And we've got much better deliveries, coming from the likes of Porro, Simmons, Kudus than what we've had in years gone by. So it will give us another avenue of being able to take points away from games, even though we're not playing well. However, the home form is not going to be sustainable. That is something that Frank will have to turn around very, very quickly, because you've seen once you start losing the home fans and they start losing patience, you end up losing a lot of belief and a lot of buying into what you're doing. And under Postecoglou, the home form was absolutely atrocious to the point where they were struggling to sell tickets. So that is something that Frank is going to have to rectify. Away from home, he's done a great job. He's made us more harder to beat. We're picking up points. I think we've got the best away record in the league right now. But at home, we are shocking, and that is something he is going to have to fix very, very quickly.
Eugene, James is saying 4 own goals so far. We can't score from open play consistently, which isn't sustainable. I'm a bit kind of worried about us going forward, to be honest, more than I am about us defensively. William Webb saying Frank is riding his luck, tries to do too much during games with style. Draws will be our downfall. If we finish 8th, we have done well. To be fair, I wish we had more draws last season. I don't think we would have finished 17th if we didn't have so many losses. We actually had a few more draws, but I do see the point. James, I mean, do you share kind of the only worry I have is just about us going forward. I think part of it maybe has to do with the style of play, but most of it is just about the players that he has to pick from, and none of them have really gelled yet. But do you think that will come at some point?
I mean, what you asked at the end there, do I think it will come at some point? If I'm being absolutely honest on this stream, I think we've got a very, very, very gloomy November coming up. I mean, I'm not sure if we're looking at the fixtures at some point in the show, but just to reel off a few: Arsenal away, Man United at home, which you could argue is easier, but Chelsea at home, Newcastle away in the cup, PSG away, all in a row, by the way, as well as Everton away, which is actually a very difficult game this season as well.
We don't do well up there.
So I mean, like, you take that, Monaco away could see us dropping points in the Champions League. Everton away, I could see us dropping points. Newcastle away in the cup. This fan base could absolutely lose their mind. Like, we could talk about it quite neutrally now. Like, we're pleasantly surprised. I think Dave or Sam, you gave it a 7 out of 10 for Frank's start. But, ask me in sort of 6 weeks' time, I think everyone could have absolutely lost their mind. And then do you look back at the transfer window and go, look, we really should have signed a left winger. Look, we really should have signed a forward. And so going back to your question, Jack, I mean, I don't think that forward line is good enough. But then again, I'm trying to hold out some hope about Kolo Muani coming back. How dead is that leg? I'm not sure. I also saw something online earlier about, apparently, was it Stefan Iverson back in the day had a really bad dead leg to the point where they thought he was going to have to retire. I think it was Stefan Iverson or one of the players sort of in the 90s, early 2000s. And so how bad is this dead leg? Not to sort of change the subject, but it's a key point in the attacking situation, because Kolo Muani was sort of our hope in improving that attacking situation. And without him, I don't have much faith in Richarlison, and obviously Solanke. How long is he going to be out for, like Sam said? So there is definitely a few issues. I just don't know how we're getting on in the next few games, guys. I don't know what you're thinking.
Where I have been disappointed, though, to your point, is the drop points. That we played some of the easier teams. We should have beaten Wolves. We should have beaten them at home. They're, bottom of the league. They struggled to score goals. Picked up no points before that. We should have beaten them. The Brighton one I'll take being 2-0 down, but also in the Champions League, that draw against Bodo. I know some people will sit there and praise, the comeback and all that sort of stuff. But we beat them out there 2-0 last year under a manager that no one else rated, with a worse team, a worse squad, with less investment in it. So for me, and I think that's one that once we've got the likes of PSG and all that out of the way, people will look back and go, oh, maybe that was a slip up. And that's where I've been a little bit disappointed with Frank. I think some of the rotations he's made for some of them games have been completely unnecessary. People go on like it's a great thing. At the start of the season, it's not. At the start of the season, players want to get into their rhythm. They want to build up the combinations and stuff like that, And then when the games start coming in thick and fast, that's when they will, are start to look for their bit of reprieve, a bit of rest and stuff like that. But right now, I think it's come back to bite us. And I think some of them lost points. I think people will start looking back on it once we're in this hell of fixtures that we have coming up, when we're not winning games and people don't know when the next win is going to come from, and go, yeah, I should have seen the warning signs coming. For me, that's already a huge red flag, that the mentality in this team hasn't changed. And there's only so much that Thomas Frank can do. The guy can come in and provide the tactics. He can provide the structure. He can have all the personnel in the background to give the players all the information they want. But at the end of the day, he's still relying on 11 human beings to go out there and do a job for him on the game. And as you know, and in life, you don't know whether what mood that human being is in. And that's something you can't factor in, into everything, all the stuff that he puts in place. And at the end of the day, that's what's going to come back to bite us. Do these players, does this squad have the mentality for a big game? You also got to remember last year, it was acceptable not to turn up in some games, just as long as to turn up for Europe. That's a hard mindset and a hard rhythm to get out for. As much as Thomas Frank can come out and say he wants to win, I've heard it all before. Postecoglou, Conte, Jose Mourinho, Nuno, they've all said they want to win. But at the end of the day, do the players. And when they're slipping up against the likes of Wolves, the likes of Bodo Glimt, and they're not looking at the bigger picture and saying, we have a massive opportunity to put ourselves in with a chance in the October international break, top of the Premier League table, full of confidence, maximum points out of the Champions League, and all of a sudden your expectations and everything else can change. Look what happened to Leicester when they got off to a flyer. They never stopped. Arsenal nearly won it a few years ago by getting off to a flyer, only they sort of faltered near the end. But they gave themselves the chance because they got off to a good start at the beginning. And for me, you can look at it now and go, good start. But all the top teams, the reason why they're dropped points is because they've all played each other. Who have we actually played? We haven't played an Arsenal yet, haven't played a Chelsea yet, haven't played a Liverpool yet. We've got all them coming up. And that's where we're going to feel the effects of it. We're going to struggle in them games. And then we're going to look back at it and see ourselves slipping further and further away. We're going to look back at the likes of Wolves, games like that, the likes of Bournemouth at home. And we're going to go, well, if we would have won them games, we wouldn't be in this situation. We would have went into them big games ahead of them teams. And anything we would have took out of it would have kept that buffer there. And I think that's where we'll be let down. At the end of the day, Thomas Frank can do everything he wants. But do the players have their winning mentality? I'd argue still no.
Okay. Rain Man seems to be bringing up the curiosity about the panel's thoughts on him rotating too much. Sam, just quickly on this, as we're wrapping up kind of the review of Thomas Frank, do you think he has rotated too much in games? Dave seems to say that was the reason we dropped points in some of these games that maybe we didn't need to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you're going to complain about Ange's rotation, namely the Fulham game, then you have to complain about the Frank rotation. I think that James already semi-mentioned it earlier. And I think we were playing pro clubs when the team actually came out for that Bodo game, and it was like, wow, this is a not very good team, not very attacking at all. And we know that Bodo are no mugs. For the last 3 or so years, they've pulled out some really big home performances. It's the furthest distance that you've got to travel or whatever in Europe. The conditions are harsh. The pitch is a 3G pitch. I think that, to be honest, he very much underestimated and disrespected Bodo by playing that team. I've also been kind of confused why Pap hasn't played that much, because
I think he had a bit of an injury, right?
He's had an injury.
Okay, that makes sense. I was going to say, because at the start of the season, he was one of our better players. He was in the argument for being our best player. And then obviously he's not really been seen, but
you could ask the same. Sorry, Sam. You could ask the same for Bergvall, though. That was my question. More why has Bergvall not been playing as much?
Yeah, I to me as well. I also like a few games where I've thought we really need some creativity, and the midfield three has been Bentancur, Paulinho, and Bergvall. And while Bergvall, he's obviously going to be a great player, I don't think he's really necessarily the driving attacking force that we need right now. And seeing, Simmons have to come off the bench in a few games, and I know maybe we can only surmise the reasons as to why Frank's decided to rest these players. But I just haven't been overly impressed with his team selections. But where I think that I have been more impressed with it is that he has had a willingness to change in game. But yeah, I think that Bodo game specifically, I mean, everyone looked at that lineup and probably thought, oh God, this is not good. And I know that you're saying that people were praising the comeback, and sure, we came back well, but we were absolutely battered, and we probably could have lost that game 5-0. Yeah. We probably could have lost the Bournemouth game pretty heavily as well. Look, there's warning signs, and that's why I'm not 100%, front row first class of the Frank engine, because got it.
Oh, sorry, Sam. I just think he's too generous with dishing out minutes. It's almost like he's giving minutes out to some players without really sort of warranting it. Like, I'm not being funny. He brought Johnson off the bench against Brighton. He done absolutely fuck all. Why throw him in an away day in the Champions League against Bodo Glimt? Expecting something different. I don't understand. At the end of the day, I think he's to a degree sort of in the same situation as other managers, but I think he's got a few more players that he can rely on than others. That he's only maybe got a core of maybe 15 players that he can really rely on. Like, he's okay to make changes in the back line and we sort of get away with it, bringing in Spencer or Danzo. No problem. I know a lot of people have a problem with Paulinho, Bentancur midfield, but it's only when he started switching that up, we started dropping points. But when he went back to it at the weekend, we won. When we won our games of football this season, it was Bentancur and Paulinho at the base. I know some people say it's too pragmatic, but the reality is it's mature. It doesn't allow our defense to be broke on as much, and also, to get the ball into the forward areas. The big problem is that front line. But, my big problem with him is stop rotating it. If you want these guys to be able to form, partnerships, be able to play 1-2s and stuff like that, and you want to get some sort of cohesion there, and you want to become deadly. We're playing them together is what's going to do that. When you keep chopping it and changing it the way he is, no wonder why we look so lackluster going forward. And right now, I'm not being funny. 7 games into a Premier League season, I think we played 11 in total. There's no need for all this rotation now. The rotation is the period that you've got coming up. Where you look at a team and go, I could make a couple of changes here and still go and win this game. But right now, it's absolutely madness. I just don't understand it right now. It's absolutely madness, and it's hindered that front line. It's also cost us some results. But in general, look, a manager's going to make mistakes when, he's only new in the door. He's only still sort of getting to know his squad. He's got new players that he's trying to blend in there. Some of the players that he wants to rely on are out injured. There are going to be mistakes happening. It's just how much grace and leeway are the fans going to give him.
Yeah,
Like,
I just
go on.
So I
Sorry.
wanted to just about what you were saying about the rotation. With the fact that we've had 3 international breaks, like to start the season, is that not the time when these players are gonna get the rest? Because whilst a lot of our players get called up, most of them aren't starters, so they're getting rest. Sure, for the Argentinians and the South Americans, they're having to travel pretty far, but for the European players, they're playing them around Europe. It probably takes the same amount of time for them to get to certain places in Europe as it does to get up higher in the UK. I don't. That is probably my main criticism of Frank, because that's one of the things that he can influence, and I've not been overly impressed by that.
Gazing far away, saying, what were your expectations for the season? That's the thing, is set between 7th and 9th, as I feel Frank needs time, and I expect an up and down season. Dave, I just checked just now. Your season prediction was us finishing 7th. In fact, at the minute, you would say Frank looks capable of doing that. It seems like right now, just with the way that we've started, we're feeling like there's an opportunity to potentially finish even higher than maybe 7th. So that's where kind of the worry is about maybe some of the over rotation and some of the drop points maybe so far.
Yeah, that's where my irritation comes in, because look, when the bigger game comes around, we are going to drop points. So I think it's naive to sit here and say we won't. We can go, we're the mighty Tottenham Hotspur, we're going to roll into town and steamroll everyone. The reality is we're not going to do that. We are going to drop points. And at some point, you are going to look back at some of these results, like many people did last year when some of these results happened, and you're going, it's not good that, Look, for me, I'm prepared. There are going to be ups and downs, but I was also one of them where I said, Frank ain't going to get a free pass. We're Europa League champions. There is some sort of standard here at this football club, and he does have to bring us to a respectable position, back into the top half of the league. Just finishing 13th, 14th in the league, a couple of places where we did last year and stuff like that, ain't good enough. I also expect them to give a good cup, a good opportunity. Conte got us to a semi-final. Jose got us to a final. Postecoglou won us a fucking cup. There's no excuse for this guy not to give us a cup run here at Tottenham Hotspur either. So for me, I'm not one of them where I was giving Frank all these free passes. There isn't a weight of expectancy at him. And there's also an argument to make, like many people made last year under Postecoglou, under some of the start we made, where is this sustainable? There's already some warning signs there. But look, at the end of the day, I think Frank has shown enough that he will get us a top half finish. I think he's been clever enough the way he's gone about it by setting us up defensively strong, which gives us a chance to win games even if we're not good going forward. And plus, he's brought in the added avenue of set pieces, which means we're not just reliant, like we were under Postecoglou, of the front three just ripping teams apart. We have other avenues of getting goals, which I think will actually give him the time he needs to get some of these players back from injury, formulate a good front three, and then all of a sudden, I think, maybe after January period, you might see a little bit of a different Tottenham Hotspur.
Gazing far away, I'm not familiar with the username, but you've been around for a very, very long time, so it's very generous support. Maybe you've changed it recently, so just let us know your name in the chat, if you will. Just quickly, and then we'll move on to some Mohammed Kudus stuff, as well as also just a bit about the attack. Gavin Hines saying, boy, you guys are too hard to please. And then Wild Talks Ireland saying, total rubbish. Frank is a class act. When we get a few more signings and get the injured lads back, we will be fine. If we get to 6th or 7th, that is success for me. Sam, are you in that boat?
Apart from the rubbish,
are we being too harsh?
I always find it so funny. It's like you criticize one certain aspect, and all of a sudden, like, nothing is good enough. It's like, at the end of the day, we're on a podcast to discuss football, right? And we're discussing how things have gone. If we all just said that, everything's roses and everything's going exactly how we want it to, then we might as well not do a show, right?
This is a bite
for an hour.
What I mean? No, but it's like a couple comments, and it always comes in, and it's always like, I like Frank. I was quite early on with when Frank was being like sort of broadcast to the fans as he might be like the favorite to take over. I took a bit of flack from Dave saying that I was behind Frank, and I agreed at the time with Dave saying that it wasn't necessarily the most exciting, being European champions, to go from Brentford. A lot of people were saying, oh, we signed Championship and lower Premier League players, and now we're signing a lower league manager. But I could see what he had been trying to do at Brentford with a low budget. And the one of the criticisms I had with And was that he was not getting enough out of the squad. Whereas the praise that I would offer Frank in the opposite for Brentford is he was getting a lot out of a weakened squad. And we can debate the kind of players that you would take from Brentford, but at the time it was probably 3, maximum 4 players that you would actually want in your squad or would take in your squad. So I don't think that being negative about certain aspects of what's going on means that nothing pleases us, because we're early in the season, and as I keep saying, every time we get going, an international break starts, and we don't even get a chance to see how the momentum goes. So I feel like we're all reserving our main criticism and judgment for when the season actually gets fully underway and we start to play these bigger teams, as you say. With whether we can score against these big teams as well as keeping clean sheets, and also just one other thing people were saying about the Palhinha Bentancur midfield being too pragmatic. Isn't Palhinha our top scorer, or one of our top scorers at the moment? I know that's not why he's in the team, but he has scored goals, important ones.
I think to Jack's point though, I think that's again it's the attacking area that really needs to come to the party, because a lot of our providers this year have been midfielders or centre backs. Bar Kudus and Richarlison. A lot of them, haven't really contributed too much. But to this point as well here from Wild Talks Ireland. Look, first of all, good evening. Good to see you. What part of Ireland you're from? Let's get off to a good start. Let's show some respect towards each other. But look, in terms of talking rubbish, look, at the end of the day, we're fans of the football club. I'm one of them. I'm a realist. I'm not going to sit here and pretend everything's all shite, because it's not. But I'm also not going to sit here and pretend everything's all rose in the rose garden, because it's not. At the end of the day, we're a team in transition. And at the end of the day, I'm going to judge it accordingly to what I see in front of my eyes. I'm not going to pretend either way. I'm honest. At the end of the day, look, I have my reservations about the Frank appointment, but I really like the guy. I'm really starting to really like what he's all about. I think he's a very clever guy. I think he's very astute. I think the way he comes across in general and gets his messages across, I think sort of keeps fans on side compared to maybe other managers and stuff like that. He's not afraid to go into the the interviews and actually address the problems rather than skirt over them and all that sort of stuff. There's plenty of positives, but at the end of the day, if you were around and you listen to my reservations about hiring in the first place was about, is he the right man to fix Tottenham's forward line and get us going up the other end? Because at the end of the day, scoring goals is the most important thing in football. It's how you put on three points on the board. So, I still feel like I'm waiting for them answers, but I'm also being fair to the guy that he needs more investment, but also some of the players to come back from injury. I'm not putting it all on him. I think we're giving a fair analysis is what I would say.
No, I'm kind of in Sam's boat as well, where I mean, I don't know what you're doing on these podcasts and streams and stuff like that. If you're just going to say, everything's, rosy and everything is, just get behind the team and that sort of thing. It's like, yeah, save that for when you're at the pub or something like that. But, when you're on a stream and everything, it's all about having these conversations. And sometimes they can be difficult ones because you're trying to find that balance of, seeing the things that have been going well, but also pointing out the things that maybe do need to be improved on. But let's go to the forward that maybe has been impressing us the most, James. Mohammed Kudus has made headlines with some very impressive stats. He's the only player in Europe's top 5 leagues to attempt over 30 take-ons and leads the Premier League in duels won in terms of taking it past his man. And he also has the most assists in the league so far. What have you made of Kudus' impact on this Tottenham side so far? Is he off to a flying start? And is there anything that maybe he can add to his game, do you think?
Yeah, I'll start with what he can add to his game because the guy is phenomenal. He is absolutely insane. Like you said, 4 assists, I think 1 goal in 7 games in the Premier League. He's been man of the match for about half of the game so far, maybe just under. He's been excellent, but in terms of what he can improve, I think at times, especially in the home games where I've watched it live, I think sometimes he gets the ball and he takes on his man, he beats a man, and then you're thinking, put a ball in, cross it, find your man. I think at the moment it's because he's just joined the team, and this goes for Simmons as well, to be honest with you. I think they need to gel more. I think they need to understand each other's game more. I think that Kudus needs to understand where Richarlison's running. I don't think Richarlison even knows where he's running half the time. But I mean, like, you get my point. I think at times he thinks he needs to do it on his own. And that goal obviously was absolutely incredible in the Wolves match. I was right behind the goal for that. And that finish was incredible. I think it was a little 1-2 with Bergvall, wasn't it? But I mean, like, we haven't seen enough of that. We haven't seen enough of the connections with the other players. And is that all down to Kudus? Yeah, you could probably argue that it's some of the other players' fault, right? Johnson, Richarlison, he is working with players that, in my opinion, are just not up to the standard. If we can sign a Kudus on the other side, the likes of an Ademola Lookman, and then a competent number 9 that actually understands the play, I think Simmons and Kudus will start to form a formidable partnership between them anyway. But I think at times some of them aren't singing off the same hymn sheet, and I think that is where arguably his end product, I say his end product, but he's making things happen more, is let down because we've got a serious player on our hands. And I think those stats could be even more insane with the right players around him.
Absolutely. I think the one thing he could maybe add to his game is that if he is going to be this good at just constantly taking it past his man, it often seems like he is a little bit unselfish where he doesn't really seem to think about, maybe if I create just an angle here, I could have that shot like he did against Leeds United, where I think he's had opportunities to fire a shot on goal there where maybe plenty of times he's looked to pass it and he's either done it too late or just wasn't able to execute it, or like you're kind of suggesting, the run maybe from his teammate just wasn't good enough either to be able to connect with. But sometimes I think he could actually be a bit more selfish with some of the opportunities that he's created for himself by just taking it past defender after defender after defender. But Dave, I think you want to come in on Kudus and maybe what he can add, or just any bit of praise that you want to show him.
Yeah, look, in fairness, in terms of his impact at Tottenham, what I really liked about him, he does what generally excites fans. When you all go back to some of your favorite players, especially in the forward areas, why were they your favorite players? Because they changed games, they got you out your seat, they have that maverick-like ability, the ability to be able to put the team on the back, provide moments of genius, and that's exactly what Kudus does. That's why he is already a hit with the fans, because he's already come in and he's brought something that we've been lacking for a good couple of years now. A player that can get the ball and run at his man, take him out the game, sometimes take 2 players out the game. In years gone by, Son used to do that for Tottenham Hotspur. You go back to that Burnley goal, the Puskas Award winner. How many players did he take out? Kudus is like we've lacked that since Son has got a bit older and stuff like that. So I think that's, credit to the guy. And he is already the most important player in Tottenham's front line. You know, how many times have we heard, in years gone by when we've signed Bergwijn, you got to give them time, Dave. Be patient. Okay, it's 3 years in now. Yeah, but be patient, Dave. With this guy, I've always said, no, if you buy the player the right ability, they can come in and make a massive impact. Look at Paulinho, look at Kudus, massive examples of doing the right business, of the right desired quality, and they're coming in and having a massive impact. So all credit to Mo Kudus. He's been very exciting, and the fact that he's already made himself the player that we need to build attack around, all credit to the guy. But what I love about Mo Kudus, Jack, as well, is the work rate. That for me shows that this is here to stay. It's not a flash in the pan. I've seen many players at Tottenham Hotspur with plenty of talent. Adel Taarabt, one of them, but didn't have the work rate to go with it. Never really fulfilled his potential. Could have took so many more individual honors out of the game, could have won so much more trophies in the game, also took so much more money out of the game. However, he didn't have the work rate to do so. Whereas you look at Mo Kudus, he has the work rate. He's not afraid to get back, help his teammates out and stuff like that, which shows me at 25, he's already got it, and that's here to stay. In order to take himself to the next level, I agree, it is goals. Now, this is where I don't blame him. For instance, we had Kane and Son in the past. Individually, you put them in a team, they could put the team on the back and go and win new games. But where they elevated themselves into world-class status was when they combined together. They helped each other out. Kane could provide some moves which showed he had a different element to his game when Son was finishing him off, but also Son could provide him with goals, which meant he could do both. Same with Sonny. He turned from a guy that was just a provider into a guy that was finisher because Kane put him through on goals how many times? The greatest partnership in Premier League history. Kudus is waiting for that guy at Tottenham Hotspur. That guy that can also feed him in. He hasn't had a host of opportunities usually. And Frank said it himself in the pre-match press conference building up the Leeds game. The right-hand side creates everything. Everyone else finishes it off. In order for him to get to the next level, we can't keep expecting him to beat 3-4 players and put the ball in the back of the net. Even his goal at Leeds, it was all himself. How many times is he really going to do that over the course of a season? At some point, someone else has to come to the party and start providing him with chances. A player that he can link up with, do 1-2s, give it, run in behind, receive it. A bit like that disallowed goal at Wolves, where he's fractionally offside. Once he gets a player like that, he will elevate himself into the next level.
What about you there, Sam? I mean, what can Kudus add to his game?
I think I think you kind of have all said it, but his decision making for me is not up to the rest of the ability of his game, I'll say. And he gives me, like, in that regard, he gives me a bit of Kulusevski vibes. In terms of, like, I feel like Kulusevski has similar ability without the pace, maybe more strength to beat players. And then you want him to take a shot on or, put the ball in, and then maybe he does a little bit too much. Now, don't get me wrong, and I've made the joke before, he's probably dribbled past more players in his 7 games for Spurs or whatever it is than Johnson has in his entire career.
So true.
And it is, though. I think even after the first game, I was like, I think Kudus has dribbled past more players than Johnson's entire Spurs career. Like,
You've been tracking this, Sam. I've heard you mention that 10 times now.
Well, there was that damning stat where Johnson, I think in the Bodo Glimt game, he attempted like 3 take-ons, didn't get past any person. And then Kudus, for the 20 minutes that he was on, attempted like 9 or 10.
Yeah.
Right. And Johnson was on for something like 60, 70 odd minutes. So that's just a damning stat in itself for just completely different spectrum that they're on.
Definitely.
But exactly. And I think that someone, I can't remember who it was, but someone hit the nail on the head with saying about he doesn't have someone to feed off of. And maybe that player could be Xavi, right? If we actually play him in the right position and play with a left winger that can also drag players away, so that when Kudus and Xavi are next to each other, the entire team, the opposition team, is not just like, well, let's just block these players and then we can leave people free who aren't going to do anything. Very similar to I always think about that Van Dijk versus Sissoko. And he just backs off and lets Sissoko take the shot that just flies so far wide and over the bar. But I think that once Kudus gets a bit more acclimatized, because I think the people do forget as well that, yes, he's hit the ground running, but he is still a new player, and he's still a fairly young player. I know 25 is coming towards the prime, but he's not in the prime yet. And he also had a tough season last year with West Ham, and he has to kind of learn to play more in a team, maybe rather than trying to do everything on his own. Which is not necessarily a criticism. It's just something that I've noticed watching him play. On the other hand, he just has destroyed pretty much every player that's tried to tackle him. Other than, I think, was it the Bodo fullback or the Brighton? No, it was a Brighton fullback, Kadioglu. He had a good game against Kudus, but other than that, everyone else has lost the ball quite a lot. Well, he's taken the ball past them quite a lot, and it's just that final decision making that it hasn't quite clicked yet. But again, that's to do with the lack of forward options that we have. And as much as Richarlison is good in the air, that's kind of the limit of his attacking play. He's not the kind of player that is going to make that run in behind and actually be able to, collect the ball that's played in before the goalkeeper or a defender takes it off of him. So with Kudus, I'm very happy with him overall. I think that he has important sort of facets of his game that he needs to improve, but he's probably up there with our best players so far this season, even with that said.
Yeah, I think he's easily been probably the best player in the forward line, but I feel like there does need to be someone else kind of on his level at the minute for him to be able to combine with. And I do feel like maybe right now Spurs have been a bit guilty of the same thing that we saw last season, where it seemed like every team knew that most of the creativity was going to come down the left-hand side and or through James Maddison. And then they could just leave the right-hand side where Brennan Johnson was completely alone. Now that Sonny's gone, it's almost been flipped where the right-hand side with Kudus is pretty much the only area that we seem to create. And then Frank has had to try to work with some sort of other player to see if he can get a similar level of creativity on the other side so Spurs don't become that predictable. I think that was one of Ange's biggest problems that I didn't necessarily blame him for. I think he kind of was a little bit found out with the fact that you do need to be a bit more balanced in terms of where your threat comes from and also where the creativity comes from. And at the minute, I think, credit to Kudus. If we didn't have him right now, I think Spurs would be absolutely dead rubber going forward. But, the fact that he is in this team helps us a lot. But that moves us on to Frank has opted for a front four of Simmons, Kudus, Tell, and Odebear in the last games. And many fans felt like it was the most fluid and exciting attack we've seen in recent weeks. James, was this front four potentially a turning point in solving the attacking issues that Dave and I have been talking about? Is that the best four that he maybe has to pick from?
I was impressed with the front four. You have to take it with a pinch of salt, though. If I'm being honest, I thought Odebear had a better game, and I thought Tell had a better game. But if you take the goal away from Tell, did he have an incredible game? Like, what would you rate that out of 10?
That's fair.
My own question. I'd probably say 6.5, 7 out of 10 without the goal, right? Is that fair? And I think this just shows about the stopgap we have at left wing, just as you were just saying, Jack, before you came on to the next question. It's around us making do with Odebear or Tell on the left or Johnson on the left. And it's like, we shouldn't have to be in that position. And it makes me pull my hair out just thinking back from the transfer window. If we'd have got that left winger, you suddenly feel very confident in the front four itself. And like Sam was saying, if you can then move Xavi more often to the 10, he's going to work better with Kudus. He's going to be closer to Kudus. You have someone doing some bits on the left as well. And then suddenly, if you get Solanke back or a different number 9, or somehow Richarlison comes back to doing something, you suddenly look at that front four and you think, yeah, that's decent. But at the moment, I think Dave mentioned it, Kudus is carrying his front four on his back. So I don't know about the front four against Leeds. I actually think, in a way, they were battering us at the end, and it probably should have been a draw. It was a well-earned win in the end, a very good 3 points. But I wasn't absolutely overwhelmed with the four collectively. I was more impressed with Kudus and obviously Tell finally getting a goal.
I think to that point though, James, like, was it anywhere near the finished article or a forward line that you look at and go, that's going to win us games? No. But from how dull we've been in terms of breaking teams from open play, I would argue it's better than what we've seen in a long time, at Tottenham. That includes a lot of last season and maybe the season before as well. And I think it's no coincidence that Johnson and Richarlison are dropped out and you put in your foremost sort of technical players. And what I mean by that is they can run in behind, no problem. They can get the ball, they can get turned and beat their man, no problem. They can play 1-2s with each other. Was it perfect? No. But Xavi Simons got himself into promising positions and delivered some promising balls. You would hope we'd play him more regularly in that number 10. The confidence will come and he will start producing more output off the back of it. I think you look at someone like Udeber. I think the massive thing there that everyone's overlooking is who plays left back. Because if it's Jed Spence, as much, and everyone knows I'm a huge fan of Jed Spence, by the way. I wish I was as cool and laid back as Jed Spence. I probably wouldn't have as many grey hairs or look as stressed out all the time and stuff like that. I really love the kid, and I love the fight that he's shown to, put himself back in the squad. However, when I look at it, and I really noticed it when he went on to the right-hand side against Wolves, he doesn't get forward as much. He doesn't offer as much going forward as a Pedro Porro or a Destiny Udogie. And don't get me wrong, Destiny Udogie's end product isn't the greatest, but he is a willing runner to get forward on the overlap at every opportunity. And what that does then is it takes players away from Odegaard. It then gives him the time to be able to get at his man and run at them or play a player in behind. I noticed that again against Bodo when Spence was playing left back, Odegaard didn't really do much. As soon as Udogie came on, space opened up down that side. And I went back and I looked why. Because Udogie went and got on the overlap where Jed Spence refused a lot of the times. So for me, I think down that left-hand side, it's crucial that Udogie plays. And when you do, you'll see a lot more out of Wilson Odegaard compared to maybe when Jed Spence plays there. And then you look at it up front. To be honest with you, until Mwani's back, I think he's going to have to make do and just try and pick the right game for a Taylor, a Richarlison, or a Solanke, because I don't really have faith in all three of them. If you want me to pick the best option right now, I'd probably go with Solanke if he was fit. He's got good hold-up play. I could see that working with Simmons. I could see that, working with the likes of Kudus as well. But again, I just think it's one of them on any given day. They could either let you down or they could go and score you a goal. I think that's something that we'll have to look in the summer and he'll just have to make do between now and the end of the season. But although it's nowhere near the article, you have to take into account it's a long time until the January transfer window, until, when these games start coming in every 2 days, all of a sudden it looks so far away. So at some point he's got to work with what he's got. And what he's got right now, I'd argue it's the best we've looked, and that's not saying a whole lot.
I mean, Sam, do you agree with Dave that I think he's right? I think the fact that it has looked a little bit better is he's probably gone with the more technical players in the team, and the ones like Johnson and Richarlison are guys that tend to almost let the attack down, where they play a sideways pass that's not necessary. They just give the ball away completely unnecessarily, and so therefore the attack doesn't look as fluid, whereas Odegaard, Tell, the likes of Kudus and Simmons as well, they all, we would assume, are just a bit more tidy with it and have that ability to create off of each other, maybe more than Richarlison and Johnson.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, you were obviously also missing our main creative source of last season, which was James Maddison, and the other option of Kulusevski. And as much as, as I said, I don't hate Richarlison anywhere near the level of hate that he gets from the fan base. He's not the striker that we need. And if he didn't seem like such a nice guy, then I think there would be more clamour for him to be kicked out. He seems to love the club genuinely, which I think works in his favour. Mm-hmm. But I watch him running around sometimes, and people used to make that joke about Xerxes. He looks like he's running with Timberlands on. Richarlison, sometimes it's exactly the same. You're like, damn, Rishi, I thought you used to be kind of quick. You used to skin people for Everton and you were their talisman. And now it's kind of like the ball doesn't really stick, even to the point where commentators make the point of oh, that's not really the kind of game Richarlison plays, the hold up play striker. And then you wonder what kind of play does he play then? If he's not a hold up striker and he's not an in behind striker, then what is he, just there for the cross? But yeah, I mean also Dave said something about Destiny and Spence, and I think he's spot on as well, because mean, I've seen that clip of Odegaard beating a player on the like in our half down the left hand side and playing the ball over the top to Destiny, and I think maybe it's a lack of confidence on Spencer's weak foot that potentially he's always thinking more about I've got to cut in rather than playing as directly as Udogie does. Someone just said about, I think Eugene just said about Kulusevski, where do I see him playing? It's not necessarily that I see him being a starter for us. As much as I think that for the first half of last season, he was probably our best player. In fact, hands down our best player. I think that it's just an option, and in games when you need him to be on the wing or you need him to be in the middle, he can be a bit of a battering ram as well. I think back to that Luton game. Oh, Dave, you're on mute.
Just going to say, sorry, Sam, could you play him off the left-hand side? Because for me, I think there's an opening there.
I think so. And especially if you are going to persist with playing Spence there, because you need to have at least one player who can cross the ball on their left foot. Not that Spence is terrible, but it's obviously not his strong foot, and as I said, it's predictable when you pass to your fullback or you pass to your winger, and their first instinct is to take the ball inside, rather than trying to beat someone down the outside, get to the byline and put a ball back. Prime Pep style. But yeah, no, I'm with you. And also this artist thing has been, I've been looking at it.
Yeah, I don't know what this is about.
We appreciate the $5, but you spent $5 to lie.
Johnson is definitely not underrated. I've tried to say he's overrated, in fact, and Matisse Tell, actually. Everyone, look, my views are well documented on these two guys, even when we first signed them all the way through. So I don't think anyone's going to buy into that. But look, I do appreciate the shithouse nature of our artist. I'm up for a bit of shithousery at times, so thank you.
Couple of nibbles from Sam tonight. I love it.
We've also just got a couple more comments here I'll take quickly as well. The Big D says, my badge is gone. We'll be back Thursday, fellas. Feel naked without it. Look, you don't need to explain that to me, my man. Really appreciate it, though. He also says, solid out of 10 for Frank. He just gained a few extra points for his honest analysis of the team. Yeah. And more importantly, himself. It's just a breath of fresh air. And that's what I really like about him, actually. I remember after the Villarreal game, he was honest about the performance. He was honest about, the attack, maybe the relationships and stuff like that. And he doesn't skirt over issues. Like last year when they were speaking to Ange about, set pieces, he's almost turning around and going, what are set pieces, mate? Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's just almost glossing over the problem. And as a fan, you're worried then because you're like, well, is he working on it? Like, I'd assume he's working on it, but then why wouldn't he just say he's working on it? And it almost feels like you're trying to decode Latin or a bit of Morse code or whatever, whereas I like Frank. He's just honest. He doesn't shy away from the problems, but he also doesn't, sort of, what would I say, run away from them or try and gloss them over and pretend everything's good either. He's just honest, and I think that's all many fans want.
I actually really agree with that, and I think that's where maybe the slight frustration I personally had with Ange last season was when he would be asked, like, what went wrong in the second half or whatever, he wouldn't really admit to it going wrong or anything, where Frank has plenty of times just gone we were pretty, without saying, he goes we're pretty shit, in the first half, and then things got a little bit better in the second. He has this real honesty about it, it's not as if he were a fan, but he just sort of sees it the way that we sort of see it at times. And he's been, even when he was asked about the creativity problem, someone asked him about why is it so much more the case on the right that you're creating than less so on the left and the center. And he said, well, at the minute, Kudus is spectacular, but we haven't really found, the right combination yet, through the middle and on the left. And that's the answer that you're looking for. That's the answer you want to hear. He does have this sort of straight up honesty about things.
It just feels like you're not being lied to, right? It just feels like you're not being lied to, at least he's standing there and going, yeah, there is an issue and this is the problem. He's not just sitting there and going, what are you talking about? Why would I work on that? And, he's not trying to protect the players either. Sometimes you see managers do that where it's like, no, there's no issue. They're great. Yeah. Everything's brilliant, where he's just honest, and it's sort of like, in a way, he puts pressure on the players without actually putting pressure on them to a degree. I think he's a really smart operator. I actually don't think he gets enough credit. And to be honest with you, I knew he was good with the press, with the amount of sort of coverage he used to get and the special Sky Sports things they used to do with him and all that sort of stuff. But actually seeing him here in, every single game, I think he needed it. I don't know. Personally, I think it's intentional how he is with the press. But if it's not, it just works an absolute charm.
I
And
think he's earned more friends by being that way with the press
exactly.
than
I'm
previous
just
managers.
being honest. It gives fans will give you patience. Fans will give you leeway. Like that Bodo, no one should ever justify a 2-2 draw away to Bodo, but fans will do it because they like the guy because he's honest and they want to back him. And that's half the battle. So fair play to Thomas Frank, even though it drives me mad, that Bodo one. But look, fair play to the guy. That's why people do it, because of how honest he is, and people respect that. And then we've also got Moondog in the house. Good evening, lads. Good evening, Moondog. How are you, my man? How are you and Charlie? Let me know. We've been talking about, what we've made at the start under Thomas Frank. Bit of praise for our magician Kudus. It's not Mohammed Kudus, it's magician Kudus now. And also, we're speaking about the front line as well, Moondog.
Well, Dave, let's get on to you on this question. Do the fans need to show more patience with Frank as he's trying to work out the best formula for the attack, or should he have figured it out maybe a bit sooner?
Yeah, look, first of all, big up, Ellie, by the way. Hopefully you're keeping well. Ricky, Nato, and Scooter Reacts. Good to see all you guys coming in. Look, I think fans will have to show Thomas Frank a degree of patience when it comes to the front line. Look, I wasn't one of them that sat there and sort of said, oh, Frank's going to do this to Matisse Tal and he's going to do this to Johnson and he's going to work with them on the training pitch. I've always tried to sort of say, when we're in Europe, there is no time on the training pitch. And Thomas Frank, anyone that thinks I'm speaking bollocks, Thomas Frank has said it in a recent interview when he asked him about training. He says, we're not really getting that much time on the training pitch right now. We're sort of only getting one session in between games, So I'm one of them that there's only so much Frank can actually work with these guys. At some point, when you're at a big club, you have to be able to rely on the individual talent rather than actually just coaching them along and developing them, because you just don't have that time at a club like Tottenham Hotspur, especially if you're relying on these guys to be game changers. The reason why City got away with it with Foden is because they could ease them in. They could spend time, developing the talent and stuff like that, rather than just putting them out there and going, be the answer to all of our problems. So we don't have that time at Tottenham Hotspur. But in general, Jack, I think we do need to show them a degree of time, because I think one thing many fans have learned, the actual quality of the player actually matters. With Johnson, he's limited. He can only tap the ball home. With Richarlison, he's limited. There's only so much Thomas Frank could do with them guys. He could say, look, put the ball in on Richarlison's head 15 times, and we do that. But no, Richarlison, he'll probably put all 15 of them wide or over the bar or make a Hames of them and stuff like that. But then the next game he could go and put 4 of them away, and all of a sudden he looks like the world beater. That's not on Thomas Frank. That's just on the limitations of the player. So I think it's going to be a difficult job for Thomas Frank. Will fans give him the patience? I would hope so. I would hope there's a big recognition to Sam's point. James Maddison, huge in terms of for Tottenham Hotspur going forward last year, out injured. I know some fans don't rate Kulusevski, but I do. I think there's a hell of a footballer in there. I think he's a huge loss coming back. And all these teams, people go, oh, but maybe they might not be the answer. But the thing is, they'll give us strength and depth in the forward line. So when Frank does want to rotate, you're not resorting back to Johnson. You're not resorting back to Richarlison. You can resort back to Maddison. You can resort back to Kulusevski, Kolomowani, Solanke. So it gives you options, and hopefully then gives you the opportunity then to put more points on the board. Also, you would argue maybe another piece or two of business needs to be done as well over the January and the summer transfer window. And I think I'm one of them. I didn't blame Postecoglou for the frontline issues last year. I knew it was a quality player issue. I still stand by that, and that's why I'm willing to give Thomas Frank time, even though it's hard for me, because in my whole lifetime at Tottenham, I've watched great attacking players, regardless of the manager, regardless of the team. I've had Lennon, Bale, I've had Modric, Peter Crouch was good on the eye, Robbie Keane, Berbatov, Defoe. I've seen some great forward players at this football club. So it's hard for me. But I understand the problems. I understand, and I tried to warn everybody when they were thinking selling Harry Kane was a great idea. Scoring goals is the hardest thing to do in football. We've realised that since. I'm glad that there's been some common sense, brought around in that issue. But for me, you're going to have to give the guy time, because he's waiting on players to come back from injury and more investment. So what can he do?
And just quickly, Sam, do you think Matisse Tal deserves a start against Villa away from home?
I think that he should be rewarded. Whether I actually want him to start up front or not is a different story.
Sorry,
Didn't he score against them in the cup, though?
He scored that sort of flicked volley, I think, or half volley from a set piece. It was actually a very good finish. or from a cross or something. But whilst I think that he can be a good player, he's not there yet. But at the same time, I've been getting more and more frustrated with Rishi so far. Like after that amazing start that he had in that first game, he's basically been probably up there with our worst players. And if we're going off like a sort of, you're trying to build morale for like players in your team, for Tell to be left out of the Champions League squad, to have been the face of or been a target of racial abuse online, for missing his penalty in the Super Cup, and then also just general like fans, I wouldn't say necessarily dislike, but fans like not getting behind him as much as a young player would need. I think that it will be good for him to get the nod up front. And hopefully, because he can play wide as well, there could be some sort of rotation in game with players as he sort of drifts out wide. Players can fill that space, and maybe that will be more beneficial for someone like Xavi Simons as well. If Tell drifts out to the left and Simons can drift in, because my biggest criticism so far, probably of Frank/Simons, is the fact that he's playing Simons on the left, but he's still pretty much playing in the middle, which means we've just got no left wing, which is really frustrating me. Admittedly, I've also not been able to watch every minute of every game. I've just been so busy with stuff outside of the pod, which is why this is my first appearance in probably like a month and a half. So it's good to be back as well. I forgot to say that at the beginning.
Yeah, I think Tell deserves probably minutes just from the case that Richarlison, to me, like you brought up, I think he's shown less than nothing in the last few weeks for Richarlison. So Tell almost had to start against Leeds, and I think he took his chance at the end of the day. I kind of agree with James from earlier. Like, was he sensational? No. But was he better than what Richarlison has been? Yes. So I think it's a pretty low bar at the minute. So I think that's why Tell should be given the start. Daniel Field with the super sticker. It's of some trees, or at least of some forest. I'm not sure if it's any sort of direct talk towards maybe Ange or anything, or it's just a nice little super sticker. But he also brought up a comment saying Villa at home next, 19th in the league, and then Monaco, or Villa next on the 19th, and then Monaco away. I think Villa actually was wrong by saying they're away from home. It will be at home. But the start they've had to the season, they'll be maybe a bit like a Wolves, where they're going to be better on paper. They have better quality, but they haven't been playing that well. But I think they are going to be pretty desperate to get some points. So that should be a tricky game for that reason. I think
managers quite unhappy there as well at the minute. You're getting a few little sound bites off the guy, a couple more defeats and he'll implode.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering if this will be one of those games where they'll be desperate to pick up something, and so it will be a trickier one than maybe we would like. And then Monaco away, I actually have confidence there. I think we should be able to.
Bruce beat them for something in the opening game, I think. They
played well against City, but then I don't think they're as good as maybe we would think. And also, anytime you get an opportunity to put 3-4 past Eric Dyer, I would absolutely love to do it, just because of what I had to go through watching that guy defend with us. But James, we're going to kind of wrap up things here with just a question on sort of takeover talks and, the fact that they don't seem to really be happening. Brooklyn Eric and his consortium have confirmed that they do not intend to make a formal offer for Tottenham, following on from the withdrawal of interest from Firehawk Holdings. The Lewis family remain firm in their stance that the club is not for sale. Does this put to bed any speculation and reaffirm maybe the family's commitment to the long-term future of the club, like Vinay suggested? Do you think Spurs any takeover talks just almost are never going to really come to fruition?
No, I think they will come into fruition at some point. I just think they're holding out for the right amount. I don't think this Eric guy was very serious. I saw a lot of things going around where he was screenshotting emails that he'd visited the club, and then it was almost like a football Twitter like argument. And I'm like, this guy's putting in billions of pounds to part of his consortium is putting in billions of pounds to take over the club. It all seemed a bit weird to me. But in terms of like the actual general takeover of the club and buying out ENIC, I think it will happen eventually. This whole thing about the daughter and the son-in-law being more interested in at the games. I mean, great. So they're going to the games. Joe Lewis hasn't been to the games for years. Like, what does that really mean? I think only time will tell in January whether ENIC are actually serious about changing the sort of trajectory and the way they change the transfers in the transfer window. I think we know for a fact that we saw a bit of that last summer, in the summer just gone. But as we've discussed for the whole show, we were one or two signings at least off from giving Thomas Frank what he needs till the start of January. So I don't know. In short, time will tell whether the club will be sold. But if they want to be serious and take it on, let's see that in January. Let's put the money where the mouth is. We're the most adhered club to financial fair play and FSP. We need to sort it out, and we need to give Thomas Frank exactly what he needs.
Quick follow-up there, James. Some people have said that they don't really put a lot of weight into what they do in January. It's more about what they do the next summer. Do you feel like there is opportunity for them to invest this January?
I think there's no, they don't have a choice. They need to invest in January. I mean, like we were just talking to half the show about not having a proper left winger, not having a proper striker. I think it's an emergency. We need a left winger. I think it's an absolute emergency.
The thing is, though, you can't just invest for investing sakes. You know, that's what got us into the problem under Steve Hitchin. You're just buying player after player after player. The quality matters. If the right quality ain't there in January, there's no point in filling up this squad. We've already got squad issues where we've had to loan out a lot of players and stuff like that. You know, there's no point in filling it out with more sort of mediocre signings. It's got to be a player that is genuinely good enough to come in here. And they're hard to acquire in January because a lot of the top clubs, you know, a lot of all clubs in general don't want to sell their best players because, you know, it has a massive impact on their finances and their rewards come the end of the season.
It does, but there's a player out there, and as I said, Ademola Lookman, he's only played 2 games this season. He clearly wants to move. For me, I was sold on him in the summer. I think he's actually very much like maybe he's not quite as good as Mohammed Kudus, but he's essentially the same sort of mold, but on the left-hand side, and it's exactly what we need in this system. So there's one example, Dave. I do agree with you. I think we don't want to be panic buying. We don't want to be buying players with a lack of quality, but I definitely think there's 1 or 2 out there that we could go and get and improve the chances for the rest of the season.
Yeah, it's fair. And by the way, everybody put in James's link here as we're wrapping up to Spurs related. We'll let him plug it as we're wrapping up things really officially at the end of the show here, but putting in the link nice and early towards the end here. Sam, Lewis family till we die, or are they going to sell at some point?
I think we'll have to just wait and see with whether they will sell or not. I think it was your nemesis, Jack, Ali Gold, who made quite an interesting point about they've rebranded themselves as like the Lewis family.
Yeah, he made some interesting points.
Yeah, he did. I like Ali Gold, but yeah, I just think that they basically they've probably got until the end of the next summer transfer window before, like, I need to see improvement and you know, ambition before I start like saying that they really need to go. We finally got a new chairman in charge, so we need to give them time. You know, it's similar to management, but you can judge them in periods, and I think that there were some aspects of the summer window that were positive. Obviously, Levy was in charge for most of that, if not all of it. Anyway, we don't know exactly what was going on behind it, but I feel like it's tough to judge them necessarily on that. And I think ultimately in January, yes, players are hard to find, but money talks, right? And we always seem to be perfectly over the FFP threshold, where we can go out and spend money, and there are players that are available. You know, as James said, Ademola Lookman was one that was high up on a lot of people's lists, and there will be other players out there, especially as the European, you know, games progress and teams get knocked out, where people might be thinking it's time for a move. And if you can put the money up, then you can get them. Look, as you say, you don't want to go out and just spend crazy money for the sake of spending crazy money. But, you know, we wouldn't be here discussing, as James said, not having a proper winger, not having a proper striker, still not really having the right level of fullback cover, if we didn't actually need the players, you know. So they have to go out and spend money, and if they don't, it will be a mark against the Lewis family name. If they leave us short again, obviously you have to temper expectations in January, but I still think at least 1 or 2 decent, like definitely potential starter needs to come in.
I think there's definitely one or two bits of business you can do, but I think, will they be able to fix all the issues in January?
No,
I think
sure
that's
not.
unrealistic. I think for the more realistic person like me, and I know people will probably scoff and say that's rich coming from you there, but I find myself realistic. And I think in January, I think maybe could you get another fullback of the desired quality? I think yes. Could you potentially make Paulinia permanent? Yes, maybe get me into the leadership group then. Of course, and could you pick up a Lookman or someone like that? I think you can. But, are you going to get that game-changing striker we need? Not sure. I don't think that will be on the market in January, and stuff like that. So I think there's some bits of business you can do to help the situation. But how much, I think that's why I think ultimately you are going to have to sort of sit back and be patient and show them, next summer, see what they're made of. At the end of the day, I think a lot of the speculation around being sold was when Daniel Levy was in charge and as the chairman and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, when you go back and you listen to the Vinay interview that he put onto this, it's on the Spurs YouTube channel. I actually encourage everybody to go and watch it after this. But, he was asked about the Lewis family's intention, and you're absolutely quite right on that, Sam. That's Ali Gold made a good point where he said they're sort of almost rebranding themselves. And that shows me that maybe they want to sort of take it over long term, but under maybe a new name that doesn't have all the stigma attached to it or all the unhappiness maybe attached to it. And, in that interview, Vinay said that the Lewis family are really clear. They see their involvement in the club as long-term and their involvement continuing through the generations, and that Tottenham Hotspur is not for sale. They are passionate and ambitious. They want to make sure that the men's and women's team have everything they need to give them the best chance to be successful on the pitch. But Vinay said they have firm backing from the Lewis family, and they are well aware of the investment it's going to take, and they are prepared to back it. Now, look, where I'm at with that. So it sounds like with all intentions, that they do want to take this on. I think it's Vivian. I think her brother and then some son-in-law, and apparently, they're massive Spurs fans and they really want to see the successful. And look, I will give them the opportunity. However, I'm not being funny. But Daniel Levy operated under a lot of the Lewis family's rules, in years gone by in terms of sustainability. And that is something that I left out that Vino I did mention, off the back of that, about the back. And he did say, of course, we have financial fair play regulations and that we need to meet. So they're still going to do that. It shows that they're not going to circumvent ways around, the way Chelsea owners and that have done. So in effect, we're still going to operate under the same model. However, I would argue the model is good enough now to be able to generate the money to go after players that can come in here and drag us to that level. If you're smart about it and you have the ambition, we brought in Kudus for around the same money that we spent, similar to Brennan Johnson. But look at the quality of player you're getting, and they both play in the same position. Look at the smart business that we're going to do for Paulinia. Them players are out there. It's just about Spurs having the ambition to really go and get them players over the line. And that's all fans want from the Lewis family, is to show that ambition. And I would argue they've been teed up nicely by the summer transfer window, by bringing in your Paulinia, by bringing in your Kudus, by bringing in your Moani, Simmons. They've been teed up nicely. They're already getting off to a start where there's not a lot of pressure on them. People are sitting back here to wait and see what they do. They've got an easy job next summer. All they have to do is follow up this summer with another ambitious window, looking to fix the problems, and live up to their words. That's all. They've got quite an easy job. And it seems like they're going to back it according to Vinay. And when you look at it, they've put Vinay in charge, Charrington's in there and stuff. It looks like they're trying to put the pieces of the puzzle in there to make the best use of the money and revenue. I think they believe that maybe Daniel Levy didn't make the best use of it. He was maybe too cautious with the revenue, always looking to buy young with resale value. Whereas these guys, you look at Paulinia, by the time we're done with him, there's not going to be much resale value there, but they understand in terms of footballing context how important a player like him is, and that maybe it's something that maybe that's the value you're getting out of him on the pitch rather than going to be able to resell him and stuff like that. And I think, I've always argued with Daniel Levy, I'm glad he's gone. It needed a fresh eyes. It needed fresh change. I think he ran out of ideas. You're hoping that this new generation of the Lewis family can sort of have the ideas to kick it on, but I'll judge them next summer. At the end of the day, Levy operated with them in tandem, so I'm going to wait and see what happens next summer.
They are definitely doing some PR work at the minute. They were at the Bodo Glimt Spurs youth game. They were walking around the stadium, doing a lot more than maybe what Daniel Levy and others had done in the past to show face and be this presence, around the Spurs hierarchy. So maybe it's all for PR reasons, but they're actually doing a pretty decent job, maybe to indicate that they are here to stay, at least for the time being. Rainman saying, great stream, well worth all the likes it will get. Thank you, Rainman. And also he left in an interesting comment here about the January signing, saying we are forgetting that the one immutable problem is that we don't have any squad players for non-club trained players unless we sell some. So there's something that,
Rainman's, I think we think alike, because I actually have that down as a video idea to put out. And, maybe over the course of, December, looking at players that are realistic that Spurs can go and get, like maybe Dennis Sarkin at Sunderland, had a really good campaign there last year, sort of, finds himself on the periphery after them by a business, but he's a player that can come in, he's club trained, he's got a bit of footballing experience behind him, he's still young enough to be able to develop, and stuff like that. So, I think there are players out there on the market that you can bring in that regard, and it's something that Tottenham are going to have to look at for sure.
And really appreciate your support, Rainman. Thanks for being in here with us. James, give your channel a plug. I'm putting in the link a second time here, but thanks for being on here with us, sir.
Thanks, Nigel.
No, thank you, lads. Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure. I've got to go and beat Dave at FIFA now, but appreciate.
Remind me what was the score earlier.
Appreciate the plug. Posting pretty much daily content, if not every other day, on Spurs related with my co-host, which is Frank Thomas. If you don't believe me, go and check it out. It's Thomas Frank's AI son, I call him. That is actually his name, Frank Thomas. Please do go and sub. But guys, pleasure to be back on. It's been well overdue. I'm sure we'll be back on a stream together soon.
Just keep losing to Dave, and you'll probably be on and on and on and on. Just you're doing it intentionally, James, so that you can get on. So Dave can show you the nice side of his shoulder. And Sam, pleasure, sir. Good to have you here on, as always. The one that unfortunately will be beating all of us in FIFA for the time being.
To be fair, I am struggling with this FIFA a little bit. I haven't quite figured it out yet, but once my life outside of this all calms down, don't worry, I'll be not touching grass for a long time. Putting you guys to the sword. But yeah, look, it's been great to be back on. Appreciate the call up as always. James, it's good to get back on as well. Even if you do miss sitter after sitter for the club, but whatever.
Can't do much from right back, mate, can I?
Or give away a penalty after penalty.
He likes to get stuck in.
Some might say you've been relegated to right back for a reason.
Fair point.
One of them ones. Anyway.
Well, thanks for being here with us, everybody. Appreciate it. Over your international break, it is hard to sometimes find what there is to talk about. So I think Dave expertly kind of maybe looked at it from a bird's eye view. Thomas Frank, review session, an assessment of what he's done so far, and then maybe just some of the question marks about the attack. We will see you tomorrow for a fan show. Feel free to come on and join us, have your say, keep us company over the international break. Thank you to Gazing Far Away. Thank you to Artist T. Thank you to Moondog, Daniel Field, and Rainman for the extra little bits of support. It does help us out a ton. And we will see you all tomorrow for the fan show. Come on, you Spurs. In the Slim Frank we trust. See you next time, everybody.
See you next time. By the way, anyone that put in comments today saying we're chatting shit, come and speak to me on the fan show tomorrow. It's open to you.